beautiful souls. It's Robin, and you're listening to the Live Life Balance podcast. I'm so excited that you dropped by today, prioritizing you and your wellness. This podcast is for my empty nester mamas, women who are getting close to this new chapter, who have dipped one toe in, or who are fully embracing this new phase. This is for the mamas who are ready to take back their health, to live their best lives. If you're looking for an authentic, supportive community, you're definitely in the right place. It's a space for us to learn how to prioritize ourselves again. I'll be your guide, pointing you to ideas and tools that you can experiment with to see what feels good for you. You'll also hear guests talking about their journeys and what's worked for them. Together, we're going to learn how to use the 1% shift method to create little shifts and habits that, who knows, maybe become your non-negotiables to feel your best. By feeling our best, we can show up in our purpose and live the most joyful life, even in the challenging times. And boy, this new chapter can seem challenging, but I can assure you we're not alone. Some of the topics we're going to talk about are self-love, self-care, nutrition, daily toxins, food swaps, mindset, and reframing our thoughts. I hope you leave each time feeling a little more empowered and at ease to take a step or two that will allow you to shine. Are you ready? If you said yes, take a nice deep breath and say, I am ready. Now let's get into it. Hi, welcome back to today's episode. I'm super excited to be here with Ashley Rawlins. She's a doctor of physical therapy. She has an advanced certification in the treatment of pelvic health. She specializes in the treatment of pelvic floor muscle dysfunctions, including pelvic pain, sexual dysfunction, pregnancy-related pain, postpartum recovery, and bowel and bladder dysfunction. She's a practicing clinician, she's an educator, and she's a writer in the field of women's health physiotherapy. I loved this conversation with Ashley. She taught me so much, and she really brought to light a few things that I had never really thought about. So without further ado, let's get into it so you guys can learn some new things. Enjoy. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the show. I am super excited today to be here with Ashley Rawlins, and we about some of the, models going to be using and showing. So you guys will have to watch out for some of the videos that will come out with this episode. Welcome, Ashley. How are you today?
Hello. Thank you. I'm well. Thank you. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Thank you. I really appreciate you coming on. I know that the wisdom that you hold and what you do resonate with a lot of people that are in my community of listeners. So without further ado, I kind of want to get started so we can get into it.
Yeah, let's dive in.
I just want to start really by asking, what kind of led you to do what you're doing now?
Yeah. So I am a pelvic health physical therapist. Physical therapist by training, but I went directly into pelvic health straight out of grad school. It was something that just resonated with me. It was an area of physical therapy that was so kind of understudied, underserved, understood. And I felt like I had a particular passion and understanding for women in pelvic health in general, and that I knew would be a wonderful place for me to specialize. I grew up as an athlete and had, having information about my body and how it worked and how it could help me perform was a passion of mine that got me into physical therapy. And then I realized I knew nothing about pelvic health, even after formal, physical therapy training on the entire body. Pelvic health was still a mystery. And so it was a place I really wanted to dive in and specialize in, and haven't looked back. That's awesome. It's so much fun. It's such an underserved area of physical therapy, of health in general. And I'm happy to spread the word.
Well, I'm really glad that you felt passionate about that and to go that way, because you're really spot on, because it is very underserved. It's very misunderstood and not understood because there's just not enough people talking about it. And but the problem that I see is we as women who go through all the changes, menopause, the menopause, the postmenopause, we've all going on, but we don't even maybe know that we have it going on, or we may, but we don't know what to do with it.
Right.
So as somebody who's postmenopausal, I did have at one time called pelvic floor therapy, but it was something
just trying to remember why I had it. It was after kids, but I had some
Yeah.
kind of therapy. Who knows?
Postpartum.
Probably,
Yeah.
yeah, probably something dropped. Who
Yeah.
knows? But I remember that I was like, oh, this is interesting. But I really thought about that when I was going through like the change of
Yeah.
this season. So I'm really
Right.
interested in talking to you about what you actually do. So would you
Yeah.
speak to how the pelvic floor therapy works or could work for people that are in the perimenopause, menopause post phase of life?
Sure. So, okay. So generally speaking, pelvic floor physical therapy is, physical therapy for a specific area of the body, or it focuses on a specific area of the body, more specifically the pelvic floor, which is this group of muscles that are at the bottom of our pelvis that make up the floor of it. They go from the
Okay.
pubic bone to the tailbone and between the sit bones, almost forming like this hammock of muscles at the bottom here. Pelvic health physical therapy kind of starts here, but really it's like a holistic whole body physical therapy. Your pelvis is just part of your body and your whole history that kind of makes that up. The main functions of the pelvic floor are to support your bowel, bladder, and sexual function. So making sure that you're able to hold urine as the bladder is filling and as you're moving in and urine and stool as you're moving in and out through your activities during the day, and then being able to easily and normally empty your bladder and bowel when the time is appropriate. It's also about being able to have normal and pain-free sex, whatever that might look like for you. And normal as in there's no pain. You're able to feel aroused or have an, move to orgasm if you're able, things like that. And it changes throughout our phases of life and kind of dependent upon certain circumstances in your life. Our pelvic health is impacted, just like the rest of our health. It's particularly impacted in the stages of menopause, right? So as you're kind of moving and transitioning from menstruating and having your period in, being able to, your body is kind of producing its own hormones to support your reproductive health. And your body starts to kind of wind down and take a break, and how it can impact your pelvic floor and your pelvic health in so many significant ways. We kind of think about the stages of menopause, or maybe like when you talk about menopause, you're kind of more classically thinking of like the like the movie style menopause, right? Like hot flashes and mood swings and those types of things. But there's so much. Menopause impacts your entire body in all of its systems, including your bone health, your cardiovascular health, your neurologic health, and your reproductive, or obviously reproductive, but sexual, bowel, and bladder health. And it's all part of the picture. There's so many ways as estrogen levels decrease, it can impact the tissue health, the integrity of the tissue. So like the connective tissue, the muscle, the supportive tissue of the pelvic floor, so that it can become less strong, more thin, and irritated in ways. And it can also decrease blood flow in the area, so it can impact the muscle, the tissue health in that way, and also impact sexual health because of reduced blood flow. So there's so much that could change and leave you more vulnerable for developing pelvic floor muscle dysfunction as we age because of the changes that occur in menopause.
That's super interesting.
And I know that that's like very general and broad, so we can totally dive into
No,
specific things.
it is, but it's so important. And again,
Yeah.
like those aren't things that we think about, right?
Right.
They're not things that are, your doctor talks to you about. I mean,
Right.
I can tell you I've been to several doctors through the whole phases of the changes and all of that, and not one person has ever mentioned your pelvic floor. And I
Yeah.
think not for most, but for some people, we may, have some of those things going on, but we're not even sure why it's happening. And
Yeah.
then so do with that. And so if someone was to come to see someone like you, what are some of the things that you would be addressing, I guess?
Yeah. So kind of like classic symptoms of pelvic floor muscle dysfunction really kind of fall into those three categories of bowel, bladder, and sexual dysfunction. it can come in other categories as well, but those are kind of like the main three buckets. And so symptoms that you might be experiencing that would be seen in pelvic physical therapy, kind of more classically, would be something like bladder leakage. So leakage of urine when it's not being anticipated. There's something called stress urinary incontinence, which is like the involuntary loss of urine during like moments of increased pressure. So like laughing or sneezing, blowing your nose, and you have those leaks involuntarily. There's also urge urinary incontinence that can occur when you have this kind of uncontrollable sensation that, oh, I gotta go pee right now. And it's like urgent and you're not able to make it on time, or that irritating sensation can also accompany urinary leakage. So it's kind of more like the classic bladder symptoms, or as we age, oftentimes it might sound like or look like frequency. If you're going more often than you used to, there's kind of a very normal and predictable for like a person, how often they should be able to go. When oftentimes during the stages of menopause, that can increase, and that might be a symptom to kind of keep an eye out for. That might be your pelvic floor contributing to urinary frequency. It might also look like constipation. So you're not able to poop as easily, or you're straining and it's painful, or you're noticing an increase in hemorrhoids, or the opposite, where maybe you're not able to control gas or stool like you used to before, or it's taking a lot to clean yourself after you poop. Like that's a lot of wiping. I didn't have to used to wipe that much. What's going on? That might be another sign of pelvic floor muscle dysfunction as it's impacting your bowel. And then sexual changes are so common in menopause and kind of brushed under the rug as like the person going through menopause's problem, right? Where they're having, oftentimes that can manifest as like lack of desire or pain, or lack of desire because of pain, or dryness, vaginal tissue, vulvar and vaginal tissue dryness and things like that, or just changes in your sexual function. Maybe you're not able to orgasm like you used to before, or orgasm becomes painful. So there's lots of symptoms to look out for, and all very appropriate to see a pelvic floor physical therapist in the stages of menopause. Oftentimes when symptoms pop up, like those that I just talked about, and they're new and different to you, the best place to check is with your healthcare provider, right? And kind of see what could be going on. Is there an infection? Is there a change in my medical health status? But when all of those issues are kind of cleared up and you're still having these symptoms, pelvic floor physical therapy is a natural next step, because there's so much about your pelvic floor, these muscles in particular, and how they function and work, and the nerves and the blood flow in the area that could contribute to those symptoms. And pelvic physical therapy can certainly help improve symptoms.
Well, I love that, because what you just said basically gives somebody who feels hopeless, like there's not much out there for them, something to try, and I think, having options, especially when, you hit walls, when you go to your physician, you go to the specialist, you go to whoever they say, and you're fine. It's just part of, you are 50, you are in postmenopause, this is happening. It's like, we all know that, like we get where we are out in life, but you're not,
Thanks
you're not
for the sympathy.
right? Like providing us, like, I don't feel good, or I'm not feeling 100%. I don't want to, am I feeling like this life? Like you're telling me there's nothing out there. And what I do, like being a health coach, the reason I do that is because I work with a lot of people who hit the wall, right? And they just are like, it's a whole thing. And one of the things that I love about, what you were saying is that there is hope. There is another type of modality that could help. And so if let's say someone was to come, so the 3 buckets, I love that. And so for each bucket, is there different types of therapy that go with them? Or is it all kind of big?
Yeah, that's a great question. It depends, which is also a frustrating answer. It totally depends though, right? Like it's like the whole human that is coming in that we like to kind of get to know and understand, because there is so much individualized care that can be applied to specific symptoms. And generally speaking, and this is super general to speak, when you're having symptoms like leakage, maybe you're not able to hold in your bladder or bowel, or you're having the trouble with wiping and things like that. Those are often symptoms of like the underlying cause is often a weakness issue, a muscle that is underperforming. Maybe you haven't haven't been using it as much because you had all of these other like factors prior to the stages of menopause that were kind of like helping you along, like these like degrees of freedom that were secretly there helping you along. And then at menopause maybe is kind of revealing some of those weaknesses. Or like I said, sometimes the lack of estrogen can impact the integrity of the connective tissue and impact their ability to impart strength and support. But oftentimes it's like the weakness can be contributing to those leakage symptoms. And so oftentimes when like a true underperforming muscle is there, then we will strengthen those muscles to help compensate or like to regain support that is lacking. That can look like pelvic floor muscle exercises, also known as Kegels. So that's kind of like the classic squeeze your pelvic floor and relax. But there's also so much strengthening that can occur by strengthening your hips and your glutes and your abs and your breath, your whole body and your pelvic floor rarely work in isolation, which is why we kind of go well beyond Kegels to try and help strengthen and support in menopause, because we can't forget that menopause does affect our entire body, including our bone health, our musculoskeletal health throughout, right? And so oftentimes for those kind of weakness symptoms, we're looking at strengthening. So on the other side of the coin, we have our muscles can be overactive or too tight and tense. Then they can present with another kind of category of symptoms. So that might be like more of your painful symptoms, like constipation, where you're straining and pushing to poop, or it hurts to have a bowel movement. Oftentimes those tighter muscles can contribute to pain with sex and things like that. Pain with penetration or pain with touch, like during outer course. Pain with orgasm, things like that. And also it can sound or feel more like those, like, I gotta pee all the time now kind of symptoms. It really just depends, because our muscles can also like be a combination of weak and tight and uncoordinated. So it really depends, like I said, on the person and kind of like what's going on, their symptoms and what that pelvic floor muscle examination reveals. So like what is going on? Is there tenderness in these muscles? Is there underactivity in these muscles? Is there a coordination issue? Are you contracting when you're not? So we would maybe more address those tight overactive muscles by retraining them, with improving flexibility and coordination and establishing a normal sense of stretch and touch that doesn't feel like pain. I'm kind of reorganizing the pain signals in our brain. So, reorganizing the central nervous system to support that. So it looks like a whole lot of things.
Yeah. So very fascinating to me. But I think the thing that stands out the most to me is the one size does not fit everyone. There's not one script, that everybody works on. And it seems like there's an integration of, it could be both sides of things. And that you guys, what I love about what y'all do is you look at people from a holistic lens, which is exactly what I do, and on a different level. But I think that's so important. And I think what you're saying about the use of your muscles, stretching and releasing when they're tight, strengthening when they're weak, really, again, goes back to movement, right? It goes back to, we think about movement and exercise in one way only, and it's to slim down, it's to tone up, it's to get muscles,
tighten up.
Right. Like, but we never really have been taught how that really affects us as women as we age, except I know like in menopause, in our midlife years, I know that we're supposed to do resistance training, but what if we actually did some of that beforehand? Maybe we wouldn't end up. So again, I think the education that y'all are providing, is great for my pocket of people, but in backing up that information to like new moms and, cause that's having babies and things like that changes like the whole trajectory down there. And, but if people were more educated on, you're not just doing Kegels because they're hilarious. You're not just doing Kegels because
they're trending.
Right. And it like, I used to do CrossFit. And so we would do double unders, and it was like a big joke, because a lot of people would have, they would be like, oh, bring your pad today, cause you're going to
we're doing double unders. Yeah.
And so I think that, again, it really goes back to the lack of education, the lack of voice around our bodies. And maybe, 50, 70 years ago, that was okay, but it's not okay anymore to me.
It's definitely not okay. And to your point about CrossFit, I mean, like I see two sides of it. Like, I love that we're not like shaming people when they have, incontinence on the platform, like bring it up and laugh about it, but also like have a solution for it and recognize that you don't have to suffer with symptoms like that.
And people don't know. That's the part. It's like, if people just had a small inkling, like, oh, this is something available to you that could help you. Because if it's happening now, my thoughts would be, it's not getting better unless you do something about it.
Yeah. So it's like one of those things, like when you start to get a scratchy throat and you're like, we don't tend to panic about that because it's like a sign of like a cold. Well, something like leakage on the platform, or when you start developing sex in menopause or pain with sex in menopause, it's not something what we love to do is like to celebrate these life changes that do come with changes in our body. Also helping to like show you a path towards hope, because these are just like signs of an issue that we absolutely have evidence-based treatments for, and as a pelvic health physical therapist, to help make things better. I know that menopause can be, or the stages of menopause can be something that people will dread or like be stressed about. And there are things that are changing in your body and things that, those are appropriate symptoms, but we also, or feelings, we also don't need, it's not like the end of anything. There's so much, it can be a refreshing, positive experience as well.
It needs to be reframed. It needs to be reframed that, it's not like the dreadful thing that people make it out to be. Now, you possibly could have some things that don't feel so good, the hot flashes, the whatever, but there are things, again, I think it's very under talked about, but there are things that can be done. And I think if you started sooner, you might have a different, but I mean, I remember when I first started going through it, I didn't know anybody going through it, because I went through it early. I started like that whole, and I was like, just like, what in the world's happening, And so like trying to kind of piece it together, there were a few things that I learned that worked for me, and I'll tell anybody, I mean, these are things that worked for me. That doesn't mean they'll work for you, but I mean, they're not, it's worth giving it a try at least. One of the things you said that really also stood out to me was, things kind of come to fruition during this phase of life. And I had interviewed a menopause doula, and she said this thing, and it just stays with me. And she said, the menopause is the great reveal. It's the reveal of all things that you haven't really done or taken care of. And I was like, that's so spot on, because it really truthfully is. It's like so much comes to the surface during that time. But I think for me, one of the greatest things that kind of came from it is that I'm not alone. I feel like I know now how to really look for different options and try them on and see how they feel for me, and not feel like I'm pigeonholed into something. But again, I didn't know anything about pelvic floor therapy, that it could be good for that. But now I'm so excited that I do, because it's something that, everybody should really look into. There's no reason not to, if you're having any of those, things going on in those buckets for yourself. The other thing I really liked was one of the things that you were saying about the holistic view was, it's not just your pelvic floor. It's other things that it's just a piece of the puzzle. And so when you start, so let's say you have tight muscles, it is about learning to breathe. It is about learning to relax. It's about learning to let go. Because I think a lot of people tense up and hold on to things for whatever reason, whatever maybe happened in their life, or it's a control thing. Who knows? I mean, there's lots of underlying things, but knowing that is something that we have control over, right? Because there's certain things that are uncontrollable, but the things we can control are our breath. We can control the stretching. We can control the relaxation. Or if you're opposite and you have weak muscles, we can control doing some things to try to strengthen those up. And I think when we get those tools that we can use, it kind of is an empowering feeling, like, okay, like I do have things that I can do to help myself. And I think that's what's most important, is the recognition that there are things out there that we can all do.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely, I think it's just about kind of framing it to another area of your body. I know we don't necessarily, as we age, we don't shy away from, we know we need to continue to stay active and stretch our backs, our hamstrings, all of, and stay moving and healthy for our entire body health. And our pelvic floor will respond in the exact same way. I mean, it's a skeletal muscle that we can strengthen or improve coordination of and flexibility for. But yeah, it does take a whole body approach, because we're not just a pelvis. We have trauma, we have relationships, we have pain, we have injury, we have medical complications, and they're all relevant, but they're all important in putting together a treatment program for healing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. One of the things you just said was, we all know we need to stay active, but I really feel like a lot of people don't know that. Yeah. I know it's like for you, it seems second nature, right?
Sure,
because it's just what you do. But I just want to say that to people that are listening, if you're somebody who's not as active, just know that being active isn't just for weight loss. It isn't just for, brain health. It is for whole body. It is whole body. And again, learning what movements work for you and what brings you joy is the most important. Nobody is ever going to, or shouldn't, and you shouldn't really want to do something that doesn't, excite you or bring you joy, because then it's just another task that you have to check off. And I think that's where a lot of people have gotten with movement and other things in their life. And so when it's just a checkbox and not a release, and then
totally,
the message is mixed up. And so one of the things I hear you saying is good for whole body, but also can be a productive thing for your pelvic floor muscles.
So. And to all those symptoms that you just kind of are resigning to, like the leakage or the dropping of the pelvic organs, that pelvic heaviness, or sex is over because it's painful kind of symptoms, that they don't have to stay that way at all. So
yeah, that's awesome. So somebody who's listening, who's like, this kind of sounds interesting, what would be a couple of, one or things that they might be able to try on at home before making a decision to find somebody, we're in Florida. I mean, obviously people listen from all over. I know you're in Texas. So are there pelvic floor specialists always? Are you guys virtual? How does all of that work?
So in a perfect world, there would be pelvic floor physical therapists all over the place. Right. In my ideal world. Unfortunately, there's not. I mean, it does continue to be a specialty that it's hard to find providers. We tend to be more clustered in major metroplex areas. But that is one thing about Origin that is wonderful. We have locations across the nation, physical locations, and we are continuing to expand, but we also treat patients virtually across the nation. So, so it would be like a Zoom call where we're seeing our patients one-on-one in the comfort of their own home, and also working through, with exercise and education, teaching patients how to do certain things, or pain theory and things like that through this telehealth session. And it can be really, really effective, particularly if there isn't a place for you to go see a physical therapist in person. You're able to, you are able to be seen by a physical therapist without a referral from your provider. But depending on the state, that changes from state to state. So it might look like you're able to be examined by a physical therapist, but for continued treatment, you need a referral from your provider. You might need one initially for insurance. Everybody's insurance and state rules are different, so it really kind of depends, but you are able to reach out to a physical therapist in all 50 states to be seen and talk about your symptoms. And then they can help kind of go with you, figuring out how to continue care if more resources are needed. So pelvic physical therapy is a wonderful place to start, because we can also go with you discussing your symptoms. And if it doesn't feel like it's something physical therapy can treat, we're able to help you differentially diagnose and refer you to a provider that could better treat you.
To at least know that it's an option for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's an amazing thing that, y'all do virtual. There's doctors and there's health coaches, and the health coaches don't just work on, again, the pelvic floor, but they work on the person as a whole. And some of the things that I was seeing was nutrition, movement, mindfulness, and all of that. And again, because I look at things from a holistic lens, I think that, you know, we marry up very well together, because those things are really, truly important. And one thing can't really function fully without the other.
No, absolutely not. And it can be really helpful to kind of talk and feel heard and understood in all of those settings that you mentioned, you know, in coaching and pelvic physical therapy, because it can feel very isolating if you haven't discussed with anybody these symptoms yet. And you're like, I don't even know who to talk to. I don't know if I can talk to my best friend about this because I don't want to feel different, or like they don't have those symptoms. And then all of a sudden I feel different again. So it can be really, really helpful to at least start there and have your symptoms validated. And then we can help you figure out what to do from there. Yeah. Often physical therapy is a piece of puzzle.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I do really feel like there's a lot of people that are suffering in silence. That's what I call it. It's like, because they are afraid to say something because they do feel different, because what they're feeling might not resonate with, you know, like you said, your best friend, or it might be that they're just having different symptoms, or they're not quite there yet, or their story is different than your story. So your symptoms
or they're
are
also
different,
suffering in silence. Yeah.
Well, that too. Or in a different way, you know? So I definitely think one of the things I did want to talk about, like, when you're in like the menopause stages, is nutrition, because I think that's really something that, you know, I do talk about a lot. And I think something that's very misunderstood and something that's under talked about is protein in this stage of life. So is that something you guys talk about with your clients?
It would depend on a particular provider's training. In general, nutrition is a play, you know, if with extended training, there's certain ways that we can bring nutrition into our treatment as it relates to like common bladder irritants, and helping you understand how your diet may be impacting your bladder function, your bowel function, the way your stool looks, and things like that, and how that's contributing to your bowel movements. And oftentimes it can also come in certain disease states if a provider has particular training. But in general, outside of kind of general tips and tricks and strategies, it's a referral we often make with trusted providers that we know, you know, are tuned into pelvic health and how nutrition really can impact that, and vice versa.
I love that. I think that's great. And again, what I like about it is you're setting them up with multiple providers that can be a team of people and a team of support for them. And I think that's super important also, because it's never a one-stop shop, right? We can't.
No, it never is. Like full health really is like a team sport. And I think that it's silly to think otherwise. Like if someone has like all the answers, it's always kind of like, how do you have all the answers? Like, how are you specializing in all of the ways? Like there's so many important pieces of the health puzzle. And I think, you know, at Origin, we're really, really, really good pelvic physical therapists, but we also are really, really good at bringing upon the team, because we're not nutritionists, and, you know, we're not urologists or menopause specialists either, or medical menopause changes. So it's important to use it approach it from a team perspective.
Yeah. And I think that's definitely spot on, because again, like we were saying earlier, it's like sometimes you do go to these specialists, but you just run into those walls. And so this is just another tool in your tool belt to use to create the comprehensive care that we all need during this time, because it isn't just one person, one piece, one style. It's kind of the whole approach to make you feel your best, really. And, you know, one of the things, the self-care, like this is about self-care. It's about caring for yourself enough to put different modalities and pieces in place so that somebody can feel their best. Which looks different for everybody, obviously. But I do think, you know, self-care is a big part of this, and recognizing what you need as a person. So, and when we talk all about that, you know, one of the things that, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, you know, to your point, it is about self-care, and it's also, but like, which feels like a lot sometimes when you're like, I don't know what to do. Or it's like, I know I need to do self-care, but that's like another thing on my list. I think one of the most important things to do is to ask for help, which can feel really scary. But when you are running into that wall that you're talking about your symptoms with your healthcare provider. I know that I kind of talked about the most famous or common pelvic floor symptoms, but if you're having any of those and you are running into this wall, I want to like cut a door open for you and like let you know that if you run into that wall, just open this door over here, because those symptoms, while they're very, very common, of course, in the stages of menopause, there's help, and that's not something you need to suffer with. And we can absolutely improve symptoms that can occur with that. So those symptoms, don't listen to that wall, that door being shut.
That's right. No, definitely. And I love the analogy, because again, I think that's what, these different modalities do for people, is they open up the different doors so that you can find something that ultimately works for you, and with you from wherever you're starting from.
Yeah.
So, okay. So before we end, first of all, I wanted to thank you again so much for coming on, because I really feel like what we've talked about here, people need to hear, because it's something that's foreign to a lot of people. And it's just putting out the education, allowing people to know what's available to them so they can make the best choices for themselves. So again, right. I'm so thrilled to have you on, because I do feel like, it's going to be heard by a lot of the people who listen to the podcast. Yeah. And before we end, I always like to ask the people that come on for what I call non-negotiables, which are things that you do on a daily basis to keep you feeling your best, no matter what that looks like. It doesn't have to, it could be anything. So what do you do for your non-negotiables?
Yeah. So 3 come to mind, and okay. We talked about most of them, but 3 non-negotiables come to mind for me. It is, I need to get movement every day at some capacity. It looks different every day. The length and duration and intensity is different every day. Some day it's stretching in my room. Some days it's going out for a long run and getting my thoughts in order, but I need to move every day. I also need to drink water every day, which I'm terrible at. But on the days that I don't get enough, I know that that's why I feel bad, is because I haven't drinking enough water. And it impacts everything from how I feel and move to my bladder health. And then the third really is as I've aged, I feel like the third non-negotiable for me is reading something new every day. So finding new pieces of education. We talked a bit about kind of really staying informed and knowing your options and things like that. And I think that has been becoming more and more important for me. So we're seeking answers of any topic that might be, looking at the news on a regular basis, or reaching out to a blog to try and find new and understood information for me. And those really are my 3 non-negotiables.
I love that. First of all, I love your movement, and that you're not locked into something, because I think, again, that's a shift in like a reframe in how you use movement, and not committing to doing something every single day that might not feel like what you need that day. So really being in tune with yourself when you wake up. This is what I need right now to make my day go as I want it to go. I think that's super important. Water, obviously, I'm going to say yes to that, because it affects and impacts so much. But I really love your last one, which is learning something new. And I think the older we get, the wiser we get, and the more we seek information. And so I think, learning something, if we're not learning something new every day, I feel like we're not really living. So whether you read something, whether you listen to something, whether you learn from someone else, I just think it's really important to look at things from the lens of absorbing and learning something that you might not have known the day before, whether that's from a book or a podcast or your child or your husband or whoever you're speaking to. I think it's super important. So I really love your non-negotiables. So if you're somebody out there who's looking for new negotiables or how to shift their negotiables, these are 3 really good ones that you might want to try on and see how they feel for you. With that, we're going to go ahead and I want to tell everybody that all of Ashley's information is going to be in the show notes, how to contact her, the name of the company, the website, all of that really good stuff, so that you guys can check it out. And then when you guys watch some of these clips, you're going to see she was holding up a pelvic, and that was pretty actually see what was going on when she was actually talking about the muscles and stuff. So I think you guys will find that interesting. But I hope you all have a great day, and we will talk to y'all on the next episode. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
That was such an amazing episode. I learned so much, and I hope you did too. I just wanted to go over a few of the takeaways that I found to be important. Number one, pelvic floor therapy addresses multiple aspects. It focuses on specific area of the body, which is the pelvic floor, and that comprises of muscles supporting your bowel, your bladder, and sexual functions. This therapy is holistic, and it considers the whole body and its history. Number two, it impacts the impact of menopause on pelvic health. Menopause brings about significant changes in the body affecting bone health, cardiovascular health, neurological health, and reproductive health. Estrogen levels decrease, impacting pelvic floor tissue, muscle, and blood flow. These changes may lead to symptoms like urinary incontinence, constipation, and sexual dysfunction. Number three, symptoms and conditions treated. Pelvic floor therapy addresses symptoms such as bladder leakage, stress incontinence, urgency incontinence, constipation, sexual changes. These symptoms can be signs of pelvic floor dysfunction, and therapy aims to improve these conditions through evidence-based treatments. Number four, it is a holistic and individual approach. Pelvic floor therapy takes a holistic approach, recognizing that the pelvic health is connected to various aspects of a person's life, including, and not limited to, trauma, relationship, pain, and medical complications. This treatment is individualized, considering the unique needs and symptoms of each person. And finally, it is empowerment and hope. This podcast has emphasized that menopause should be reframed as a positive and empowering experience. And pelvic floor therapy provides that evidence-based treatments, offering people hope and solutions to individuals experiencing pelvic health issues. And it also just encourages us to take a proactive approach to managing and improving our symptoms. As you all know, this podcast is for educational purposes. If you have any of these things going on and you're not getting answers, I would highly recommend speaking to a pelvic floor therapist and seeing if maybe you could get yourself some answers that way. I think it is very enlightening to know that we have options, choices, and opportunities to create better health, even when we are in the midst of midlife and all of the changes. I hope you guys have an amazing day, and I look forward to speaking to you guys next week. Have a good day. Thanks for tuning in today. I loved being here with you. I hope that you got something from today's episode. I'd love to hear what resonated with you. Drop a comment below, and if you feel led to, download the episode and share it with someone you love that needs to hear this message. As we continue to spread the goodness of this podcast, I'd love for you to help us by leaving a review on Apple Podcast or a rate on Spotify. As we increase listeners, we will come up more often when women are searching for podcasts to listen to. To stay connected with me, you can check out my social media pages at Live Life Balanced with Robin. You can check out my website at livelifebalancedwithrobin.com. You can book a discovery call. And if you're looking for a way to get started right now, you can opt in for my new quick guide for the empty nester refresh. You can join my waitlist for my new course, It's Your Time, which is going to be launching soon, which I'm super excited about. And as always, thank you for letting me be part of your day. It truly means a lot that you're allowing me to be on your wellness journey with you. Until next time, find peace, love, and light by breathing, being present, and allowing for all possibilities to happen.